Thank you very much, Derek, and thank you to all of you. It's been such a treat to sit and hold the whole day just for absorbing all of the great conversations and presentations that have happened. I will try to do your presentations justice, but you'll have to give me some grace as I try to summarize what has been a very rich day of discussions. So I came away with 8 takeaways, and I'll just move through them very quickly. The first is that, there is growing evidence of this nexus between the nutrition and the environmental sectors, and the importance of this nexus will only increase with time. Several presenters referenced the stats that everyone in this room is familiar with. There's already nearly 870 million people hungry. Demand for food is projected to grow by 60% by 2050 if we keep on the same route with energy as well as protein demand projections. And obesity and undernourishment rates are very high. They are projected to increase as low and middle income economies go through the nutrition transition as well. And so this is an area of study that will just grow in importance over the next several decades. One point that was clear in many of the panels is that there is a high value on policy-relevant data that will build on the linkages between the work that the USDA ERS is carrying out, the great work that's being done at the University of Minnesota on the environmental consequences of a lot of our dietary trends, and what USDA is also doing on nutrition. And I think as we get more data on this, it will allow us to have a more evidence-based discussion on the optimal way forward for human health and the environment. Dr. Heller, in his presentation, made a good proposal for this through trying to put a lot of the way this problem is viewed through life cycle analysis, and he articulated some of the gaps in the data that would need to be filled for them to be able to put that together. It was also clear in the presentations that the link between the environment and nutrition goes both ways. Dr. Burlingame from FAO this morning made the case for the role biodiversity plays in nutrition. She discussed, through many examples, but one that was especially stood out in her slides was that different varieties of the same crop carry different types of nutritional values and different role in local ecosystems. So it's really important to have a sound understanding of the agroecological approaches as we're considering nutrition. A lot of the presentations, though, focus on how diets impact the environment. There was a lot of discussion about meat, especially beef, as having some of the biggest impact on land use, water, and greenhouse gas emissions. Ms. Cassidy's presentation had a lot of powerful statistics, such as 36% of all calories produced are used for animal feed. And of the U.S. diet, meat consumption has the most significant environmental impact. And, she went through 44% of the land use that we use for agriculture is dedicated toward meat, and other powerful statistics on water and greenhouse gas emissions. In that same segment, Dr. Mittlemer, you'll have to forgive me for that, flagged that usage of land, water, and greenhouse gas emissions, especially for livestock, varies depending on geography. In the U.S., it's not as big of a component, but if you go to other parts of the world, especially in middle and low-income countries, it plays a bigger role in environmental consequences. Mr. Seaver, in the final presentation here, pointed out that consumer tastes tend to favor certain products over others, and a lot of that is due to marketing. It doesn't necessarily depend on what the local ecosystem is. And many, many presenters and the people in this audience touched on the impact of waste on the environment. The statistic that was used many times, that 30-40% of food is wasted globally, and waste can be used in a much more sustainable manner. The fifth takeaway that I heard was that there is consensus that shifting to the recommended dietary guidelines, that is, the recommended dietary guidelines in the U.S., will have environmental impacts. One thing to flag, though, is we did focus a lot on the United States today, but and so in discussing if in a vacuum, if we were to make that change, what type of an environmental consequence that would have. It is worth thinking about, too, the relationship that the U.S. agricultural production system has with the international agriculture and food production system too. We learned from Dr. Jones that there are literally not enough fish in the sea for people to consume the recommended portion of protein. This is true if we were just looking at fish consumption in the United States or fish consumption globally. Dr. Peters then gave a presentation about what impact it would have on the environment if we were to meet the recommended fruit and vegetable fruit and vegetable consumption guidelines. It would roughly have to double the amount of land that is currently being used to produce fruit and vegetables, which is not, he said, in the larger perspective of things, it doesn't cause any kind of major environmental impact. Again, Ms. Cassidy from the University of Minnesota presented data about how if we were to decrease meat consumption in the U.S., it would mean significant savings of land and water resources and greenhouse gas emissions. And many of the presenters flagged that limitations on the data really prevent us from having that evidence-based conversation. And so it goes back to the point we made earlier just about the importance of collecting that data as we move forward. The sixth point was that there were a lot of discussions around how decisions are made about what food is produced and why consumers buy what they buy. Our colleague from the USDA ERS pointed out that commodity prices are increasing and are more volatile, but food prices in the U.S. have remained the same overall. But it was interesting as he kind of broke out how food prices for fruit and vegetables and eggs, for example, are much, much more volatile than generally the mean of all food prices. Mr. Seaver again flagged that people's familiarity with a product may limit their food choices. He gave us example of how a restaurant in New England, when they introduced new options on the menu, consumers began to choose them, but they never would have chosen them had they not been introduced and there been some type of degree of marketing around them. And then finally, there was a lot of discussion about different types of policy approaches. This morning, Deputy Secretary Merrigan made the case for how we can connect communities to producers through farmers markets and children, doing school gardening with children. And she roughly made the link of how that could increase consumption of fruits and vegetables. She also argued that we can use creative solutions to bring fruit and vegetables and other healthy foods into food deserts. And an example she gave is a new program that USDA is doing to deploy mobile food trucks. I live in Chicago, so I've seen these fresh fruits and vegetable trucks rolling through the food deserts in Englewood, and I can't speak nationally to what the findings are, but it has been increasing purchasing of fresh fruits and vegetables in the areas where it's being piloted. Ms. Cassidy talked about vitality groups work in South Africa, where they're doing testing about how discounts on healthy food actually did incentivize people to increase consumption of fruits and vegetables, and it decreased their consumption of less nutritious foods. There were some concerns about the practicality of doing subsidies or taxes on these foods in the United States. And Dr. Weil gave a terrific presentation about how some policy considerations that should be made as we're thinking about how to incentivize or disincentivize either purchase of nutritious food or thinking about how food has an impact on the environment moving forward. One thing that would be interesting to talk more about tomorrow is non-policy solutions, how other major game-changing actors will be able to bring solutions to this nexus. And so it would be great to hear more about how those players might be able to partner with public policy or be able to take action on their own. So thank you, Derek. Thank you to all of you.
Thanks, Lisa. So all that remains for me to thank the moderators and the speakers for today. Remind you that we have to be back here at 8:15 tomorrow, and that I've tried to persuade Tim Lang that the title of his speech, based on a lunch conversation, will be shifted to something really useful. He was saying that he was told by his grandmother that a pear is only ripe for 20 minutes. He's going to tell us, how do you know when that 20 minutes has started? Thanks, and see you tomorrow.